Joining us now, Heritage Foundation public finance economist EJ Antoni. So EJ, again, the numbers are always wrong. And again, we go back to the debate in regard to crime and on jobs. The federal government, the federal bureaucrats don't get it right. So my question for you is this incompetence or is this intentional?
Well, I think there's a very good case to be made that it starts out as incompetence, but now we're getting to the point where you have to wonder, why is nothing being done? This is particularly true in the labor market statistics where, Sean, we could see that there were problems dating all the way back to the spring of 2022. And I understand that a lot of things have changed in the economy in a post-pandemic world. And so it makes sense you would need to adapt and change your models, your methodologies, et cetera. And the fact that we are now 2 years later and nothing has been done, the Labor Department has done nothing to correct these issues, I'm sorry, that's a cause for alarm.
EJ, I want to move on to this. Kamala Harris's mouthpiece tried to defend her record on dealing with the debt and the deficit.
When it comes to people who care about the debt and deficit, I think that they want to see that people are willing to raise the revenues to pay for their plans. And I think with Vice President Harris, she's put forward a suite of proposals to make sure that we have the right revenues to help pay for some of her proposals.
The debt and the deficit, really? So they've added almost $8 trillion to the debt. And in an economy that is slowing dramatically, she wants to hike, say, capital gains taxes to the highest level since 1978. And Ian Sam said, oh, well, I come on this network. Her proposal isn't as horrible as Joe Biden's. I expect a little something, a little pat on the back, that she doesn't want to raise taxes as much as Joe Biden, but again, the highest on capital, all in cap gains since 1978. And he expects some huzzas because they've jacked the debt to $36 trillion.
Well, if you want to kill investment, which means killing economic growth, a higher capital gains tax rate is the perfect way to do that. And we should point out that not only are they going to add about $8 trillion to the debt, but also run down Treasury's cash balance by another $1 trillion. So it's really $9 trillion of overspending. And that's about a quarter of the entire national debt when these people leave office in January. So essentially, they are responsible for 25% of the nation's debt, despite having only been there for 4 years. That's pretty remarkable. But on top of that, we need to really put in perspective, I think, just how bad the fiscal situation is here, and the fact that it's not a question of revenue like that gentleman was just saying. We are taking in plenty of revenue. The issue is too much spending. We just got the monthly Treasury statement for August. It was the worst deficit for any August we have ever had in the history of this country. About 55 cents of every dollar the government spent had to be borrowed. We have spent now over $1 trillion just in interest on the debt, not paying it down a dime, just the interest. We've never done that before in any fiscal year, and we still have another month to go before this fiscal year ends.
We're approaching a death spiral.
Oh, and he also slipped up and said, we've lowered the deficit, which is a lie, too, because the deficit is up this year from last. But go ahead.
But let's move to this, EJ, because the Biden administration is slapping big tariff hikes on Chinese imports, including a 100% duty on electric vehicles, 50% tariff on chips, and a 25% tariff on batteries and steel. And so this is where Kamala Harris talks out of both sides of her mouth. In the debate, she was just talking about all these tariffs are passed off to the consumers, and it's a tax on the consumer, giving a hard time to Donald Trump. But here, Kamala and Joe are doing the exact same thing she was giving Donald Trump a hard time for in the debate. You can't have it both ways.
Sean, that's exactly right. And look, there's a lot of misunderstandings in terms of tariffs and taxes on international trade. Look, there's essentially no difference between taxing international trade or taxing domestic trade. The question is just which would you rather tax? Would you rather have an income tax, for example, or would you rather have tariffs? Again, taxes on domestic trade versus international trade. And it doesn't matter who puts them in place. We should also be clear about that, whether the Trump administration puts them in place or whether the Biden administration puts them in place. Who is the actor here is not going to change the effect on the American people.
Can I add one thing on these EVs? 100% tariff on imported EVs from China. They are mandating that almost 70% of cars made in this country in 8 years will be all electric or at least partially electric. But they are essentially banning any car that is inexpensive from coming in from China. This will jack up the amount of money that the federal government has to subsidize this money-losing boondoggle of an effort, EJ. That's what doesn't make any sense, that they would slap 100% tariff on EVs at the same time forcing automakers to make them and Americans to buy them. Fiscally, it is insane.
Well, that seems to be the pattern, though, for this administration, doing things that are fiscally insane. Look, the regulatory machines that they have put in place at this point have burdened the American people with thousands of dollars in additional costs per family, and oftentimes those higher regulatory burdens aren't even captured in our inflationary metrics. So when we talk about the cost of living being up $10,000 or $20,000 for families, again, the regulatory burden is on top of that. So what they've essentially done is created a situation where they're going to force you to buy an EV because of the crazy CAFE standards, but then on top of that, they're going to make the EVs even more expensive by putting these punitive taxes in place.
Right. You know, EJ, I think it's great. We're going to assemble vehicles in the U.S. Wonderful. Gas-powered vehicles and EVs, great for the American worker. However, the critical minerals that go into these EVs aren't coming from America. China owns the critical minerals. So again, all of the innards of the vehicle is still coming to China, and it's a national security threat and risk to this country to make this transition. Quick last word.
That's absolutely right. And one of the key things that people miss a lot of times is the fact that getting so many of these rare earth minerals out of the ground is incredibly damaging to the environment. But we love to ignore that for some reason and think that EVs are green. They're really not.
Because it's in the Congo. They don't care. EJ Antoni, always great to see you. Thank you.